Okay. All right, let's go ahead and get started. I'm Dr. Paul with Chiropractic Personal Injury Marketing, and we're doing a spotlight. This month's spotlight is with Dr. Mark Holland, chiropractor in St. Louis, Missouri. He has 3 chiropractic offices, and he focuses with personal injury cases. And why we're doing a spotlight with Dr. Holland is he did something really unusual. He took what's called a MIS case, the minor impact soft tissue injury case, which is very common. It's the most of the types of cases, and he took that case from little to no offer to maximizing policy limits. And so we're going to go into the detail how he did that, how he was able to do that. So, Dr. Holland, if you could when we get started, give us the end result. What exactly happened with the end result of this case?
That's a good question. We actually ended up getting a settlement over policy limits. They were initially offering little to no payout for 3 passengers that were involved in a vehicle. We had 2 of the 3 passengers, and the attorney that was on the case with us was quite impressed that we were actually able to get, again, over policy limits.
And this was after your testimony. This is what the case was able to do.
Correct. We went to mediation a little before the Memorial Day holiday. That's correct.
Okay. So you ended up, do you remember roughly what the policy limits were on this case?
Yeah, I think they were in the high 30s, low 40s again. No, high 30s, and we ended up getting 41.
And that was for all three injured victims.
Right. And 2 out of the 3 were our patients, and the third, it was an interesting one because we were able to directly observe the outcome as, you know, from our testimony versus the testimony of the opposing and the testimony of the other chiropractor that was on our team, well, not on our team, but was working with the 3rd passenger that is not associated with us. And our 2 patients and my testimony in the mediation was able to get a higher award based on our findings and and again, our testimony.
And before we get started, so basically of the 3 victims, 2 of them were yours. And what was
Correct.
the initial offer? Do you remember?
Initial offer, grand total was 20. So with our testimony, we were able to get up to 41. And on that 20, we were going to get very little, if any, payout.
Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and get started on how you were able to essentially double the case value. So
right.
When we look at personal injury case management, essentially there's 4 major steps. Let's talk about the first one, which was the cause and effect. So give us the brief history of what accident, what was the history of the accident that caused what injuries?
Now, the mechanism of injury, there was a 2-car. It was they were the passengers. They were rear-ended. The driver of the car was not my patient. My patients were the 2 passengers. So we had a passenger in the front passenger seat, and we had a passenger in the right rear passenger seat, both wearing seat belts, no airbags deployed. Very minimal property damage and under 1,000. So in other words, it is a minor impact soft tissue type of case. And within that, under 1,000, I'm not sure the exact damages, but again, the cars were very similarly sized, both moderately sized vehicles. Nobody went to the emergency room. There was no contusions. There were no concussions. There were no fractures. There were no apparent disc injuries. So there was no neuropathies or anything like that. There was no life-threatening type of problems after the accident. And again, we did take care of the 2 passengers. The driver was proximity-wise in a different geographic area in town, so she did go to a chiropractor in her part of the town.
Right.
After the case.
Well, let's see, you say the airbags did not deploy, less than $1,000 in property. Do you know roughly the speed that they said they were hit?
They don't think it was more than 10 miles an hour, but they weren't positive. They were at a stoplight or a stop sign, some sort of stop device, and at that point they were, again, struck pretty much directly from behind, not a side blow. They were not turned. They were facing straight ahead.
So this is definitely what we classify the minor impact soft tissue case. So what was your diagnosis?
We diagnosed them at that point with, whiplash, so sprain strain. We also had diagnosed them with a reverse cervical curve that was objectified with X-rays. We did take X-rays of, of the neck and the back, and there was some various misalignments in the spine, and there was some shoulder issues on both of them. But again, no neuropathies, no disc, no concussion. None of those types of symptoms or diagnoses.
So just a classic soft tissue injury is what we're dealing with here.
Correct.
With no major complications. Now, when you say you did the X-rays, what exactly did you do to objectify this injury?
Well, along with the X-rays, the X-rays to start, we did a series for the neck. We did a series for the back. We just a pair for the neck and pair for the back. And in looking at the neck, it was very apparent that there was a reversal of the normal cervical lordosis, so it should have a nice curve. That was gone on both my patients. In addition, orthopedically, going through the tests, if there was any overpressuring into the joint, in other words, if we would take them into for instance, a lateral tilt in the cervical spine and apply light pressure to the head, they would it would elicit an increase of pretty sharp and direct pain into the neck. And that was in the beginning of care. As we did progress through care, we were able to reduce that to where it was completely gone. We were able to get their range of motion restored back to normal. And again, on the X-rays, we were able to prove that that our care was proper, because we did restore that normal cervical curve over the course of about 3.5 months.
Now, even though a compression test or a range of motion test is considered objective, it can be highly disputed because the patient has to tell you.
Sure.
But you can't dispute X-rays because that's involuntary. It's not. So how did you document this injury on an X-ray? What did you do that's different or unique that most doctors wouldn't do?
We did use lines of mensuration to show where that the vertebrae, there's 7, for instance, in the neck, where they should be in relation to normal, and how they were not in normal alignment, again, with our lines that we had drawn onto the X-rays. And by showing from the first set of pictures to the last set of pictures the vast improvement and reporting that, I think that helped dramatically.
Okay, so you were able
with
to
at least our side of the case, with our 2 passengers that were in the vehicle.
Okay, so you were able to show visually on an X-ray where there were abnormal alignment of the vertebra.
Yes, okay. And it was very apparent too.
Okay, and you called that, what did you call that?
We called it a cervical kyphosis due to the accident, and we were able to not only document it, but also present that, because they did bring that up in mediation. Why did it take more than a month? Because the opposing chiropractor said, on the other side, on the defense side, that these guys, these patients should not have had more than a couple of, maybe 3, 4 weeks of care, and anything beyond that's excessive because of the low amount of damage to the vehicle, which we disagreed because of the fact that there was such dramatic change on the X-ray starting to finish.
Okay, so for the objective findings, you said we've got the X-rays, we've got of course you have the history of the complaints, and then you have some physical exam findings. So
Correct.
that takes us to the second phase, which was the objectification of the injuries. So
right.
Let's go to the third phase of the case management, which was your therapeutic approach. So if you could explain your therapeutic approach.
Well, what we do, we always start, due to the 3 phases of healing, everybody starts off in the inflammation phase. And that's usually those first 3 days or so. And when we started, after doing a thorough exam, we went ahead and assigned what was called the TENS unit. That was to help with the, and at home using ice. That was to help with the inflammation and the pain that's associated with the type of injuries these gentlemen had sustained. Once that phase is up, then we move for the next 3 or so months into the repair phase. And during that phase, our whole goal is to start repairing and getting these patients back to their normal activities of living. And by doing that, we're going to be doing things like adjustments. So we're going to be doing adjustments to the neck, adjustments to the back. In these gentlemen's cases, adjustments to the shoulders as they were wearing their seatbelts. In addition to that, we're going to be doing maybe some traction with the roller traction table. And then and finally, we're also going to be adding to that therapeutic exercises to stretch and strengthen into those affected joints of the neck and the back. And again, we did that over a 3.5 month period.
Can you explain why in the repair phase of healing that your physical medicine was so important?
It was very important because in the exam findings, we found that with any type of overpressure, so in other words, there's 3 physiologic ranges of motion. So you've got your range of motion, you've got range of motion that I can take you through, and then we have the joint space motion. So with the adjustments, the chiropractic adjustments, we're working on allowing their abnormal joint space motion as found in exam to return back to normal. And in addition to that, we're working on getting any affected soft tissue to make sure it's got its normal motion. Because again, when you're in a sprain strain type of accident like they were, and having the soft tissue affected in the way it was, scar tissue is going to form. We want to make sure that that scar tissue is at least lying down as efficiently as possible, and in doing the therapeutic exercises in the forms of stretches and then moving on to strengthening, during that repair phase, we were able to get their range of motion back to normal, their orthopedic tests all back to normal, and most importantly, their x-ray findings back to complete normal.
Okay, so that takes us through the therapeutic approach and why you did what you did. And of course, you were able to document this and explain this in the court of law, right?
Well, yeah, we had a mediation, and that was held at the defense attorney's office. There was myself, the patients, the other chiropractor in the other demographic area, the other geographic area that is. There was the 3 mediator attorneys present, and then myself, and we were able to prove, at least with what we did, that not only was it necessary, but in explaining how we went through our phases and why we did it, I think it dramatically helped. As a matter of fact, it helped so much so that the attorney, because this was again late on well, not late, but it was in the Friday evening, I got a phone call about an hour later. And that phone call was the attorney, our attorney, expressing that he was excited as our testimony was able to get over policy limits, which he was surprised.
Well, let's go into that just a little bit. Now we're kind of done with the 3rd phase of case management, the therapeutic approach. Now let's go into the 4th factor, which is the prognosis. Right. So what was the prognosis that you were able to associate with this?
Well, with these gentlemen, we were able to show with the changes we were able to do that we had gotten them back to normal. Now, with some of our cases, we work on more of like permanency, so we're able to then do some different studies that will allow for permanency to be spoke about. For instance, we do our activities of daily living and duties under duress forms to show, is there still any overall inabilities to perform their activities of daily living at home or at work as a duty under duress. We are able to use those forms along with any changes, like for instance on a flexion extension x-ray. We've used those also to show that there can be an altered intersegmental motion or alteration of motion segment integrity, which again is an impairment that can be then shown as a problem that's going to continue, and as a result of that, we can then help to defend that, or we can help with the defense in showing that there's going to be permanency and therefore there's going to be a need for future care.
Well, real quickly, how would you show that permanency?
Well, we can do computerized radiographic lines of mensuration, and in doing so, that will show on, for instance, let's say there was a cervical flexion extension study that showed that there was an altered intersegmental motion in these types of cases. That will actually give up to if there's an altered intersegmental motion, that will give an impairment rating, and we can show that, and we can also bring that into the notes and allow that to further help substantiate the need again for future care.
Okay. And so we're talking about permanency. We talked about the permanency of the condition and how you would document that. Now, how would you translate that into future care? What would they need and why?
Well, if we show that there's for instance, like I said, with the altered intersegmental motion, the problem is we see those patients will tend to feel better with care, and then if they go out beyond a couple of weeks, everything gets tight again, whether it be their neck or their back, and they're unable to then perform their activities of daily living or the duties at work or with children or with their normal daily lives, putting on their clothes, laying in bed. And if we can show that there has been an effect, again, with those radiographic lines of mensuration showing that there's either an altered intersegmental motion or alteration of motion segment integrity, that can then be, again, once it's measured, and along with the fact that we can show that when they do not come in for more than a couple of weeks, but now they are returning back to that pain, it shows there that, unfortunately, we've got them to the max that we can get them. But beyond that, they're going to need future care based off of the fact that they are going to need motion put into the neck, motion put into the back in order to keep that normal motion established so they don't start to develop degenerative joint disease, degeneration of the neck, the back, arthritic changes, again, due to the fact that there's altered intersegmental motion.
And you're able to show this with your lines of mensuration on x-rays?
Correct.
And you're able to explain it relative to the healing process?
That's correct.
Okay. So in summary, let's just walk through this particular case as it relates to some of the major financial drivers. So if we talk about this particular case relative to the injury diagnosis, you say the diagnosis here could have been either altered intersegmental motion or alteration of motion segment integrity. Is that right?
Correct.
Now, you did not have no fractures, no surgery, no disc injury, no neuropathy, no mild concussion. So you had a classic,
correct,
what's called the MIST, minor impact soft tissue injury, that everybody minimizes. Correct. So you were able to document this case and show that specific injury objectively. So that's the first phase of the injury for the financial drivers. The impairments and the permanency, you're telling me that you're able to explain how this type of injury can be permanent.
Correct.
Okay. And then after the permanency, you talked about the loss of enjoyment of lifetime activities. Can you explain how this person would have pain or discomfort and how it would relate to the loss of lifetime activities?
Correct.
Okay. And that would be based on what? How would you explain that?
What we did was we would not only we would have the form, but in using the form, once we can show that they're still experiencing it, then we can relate it back to the fact that if they can no longer perform, whether it be the activities of daily living or lifetime enjoyment, without further adjustments to keep them able to participate, we could use the fact that they can no longer participate in those activities of daily living and or loss of, if they cannot participate in in any type of activities without care on a regular basis, that will substantiate the need for care. And in substantiating that need for care, they can oftentimes they will get a higher settlement value because of the fact they do need more care, again, based off of those exam findings and those activities of daily living forms and loss of enjoyment forms.
And can you relate this to the physiological three phases of healing?
Sure. Yeah. So again, when we have the joint space motion, which is your normal motion that anybody can go through, that's part of it. In other words, let's say you're lifting, you can go through a normal range of motion, but now if we put slight pressure into that joint space motion, in other words, you're lifting a child, or maybe you're lifting groceries, where you could normally go through a range of motion even within the office, but now we put some joint space, the joint space motion with the overpressure. Now we got a problem. Now they can no longer perform those activities they're living, and that's a big problem, because without the future chiropractic adjustments and or some type of motion into the joint, which we do, they're going to have an inability to participate, whether it be picking up that grandchild, that bag of groceries, any type of motion that is going to include a little slight overpressure, and it doesn't take much.
Is that what happened in
That's
this case?
I'm sorry?
Is that what happened in this case?
With this case, we got it to the point where they no longer experienced that, but that did show as one of our reasons why they allowed the care that we provided over that 3.5 month period to be completely within like 80% included in full, versus the other opposing, well, not opposing, but the third chiropractor, the third patient's chiropractor, they were cut down about in half of what we were able to.
Were your patients, did they have positive findings with the lifetime of enjoyment activities or duties under duress?
In the beginning, they did. They did not have any residuals towards the end.
Okay. And then, so that takes care of those, the third and fourth financial driver. And then we talked about permanency. You were able to objectively document permanency with your lines of mensuration, and then future care. And then you say you can take this, show it on an x-ray in the court of law, and then relate that to the three phases of healing and their history, and then base that on future care.
That's correct.
Is that kind of a summation of what happened in this case?
That's pretty darn close.
Okay. All right. Anything that I missed that was significant, and how you were able to take this case and essentially double it with your testimony?
Yeah, no, in closing, I would say it was just interesting again, because we had the two gentlemen, the separate female, and we could actually see with all the same controls, the same attorney, the same mediators, the same defense attorney, the same type of care, the same opposing attorney expert, the same car, the same impact, that our way that we handled our side, at least our two guys, compared to her one, we were able to get a significant difference, double at least what our settlement was. And then also, again, going from 20 to 41, which is again over policy limits. The attorney found that quite interesting, and the mediators apparently had talked with our attorney and said that was interesting to see the difference between the two chiropractors.
And of course, you weren't in the room, so
this is all after.
Right.
No, I actually had to get back to patients.
Right. You're not allowed to be in the room, but no. Basically, the end result was the difference. That's very interesting, because it was the same injury with two different chiropractors and totally two different results based on
same everything.
Your testimony. That's so interesting.
And that's a rare thing. I've never been on one like that with the three, and we got the opportunity to have two out of the three and to go in through a mediation and really get a real an objective nuts to bolts type of observation from the opposing side, and they even found it interesting to see the differences.
Right. Yeah, that is interesting, because it's the same case. Last question. In your experience, how in dealing with attorneys, how many of them are familiar with what you just explained, with how to document and process what's called the missed case, the minor impact soft tissue injury case, to maximize the claim value and document all this and be able to explain how familiar are you, the attorneys you work with?
Well, we've been, unfortunately, a lot don't find that the missed cases are very, very good cases. They think that it's kind of like it's a pain in the butt type case, and it's going to be a low ball type of case. That they don't want to deal with them because they know that or at least they've experienced that they don't get settlements very well on them, and they kind of toss them aside. But what we found is kind of actually the opposite. It seems like as long as you can explain the the reasons and using the 3 phases of healing, explaining and tying connecting the dots between the mechanism of injury and why we did what we did, and any permanency that might be still lingering at the end, and using the correct diagnoses, and then using the duties under arrest and loss of enjoyment type of forms, and connecting that with what we did. It seems like it's interesting to see how much easier that these attorneys are starting to see that it makes it when it's kind of put together and packaged in that form.
That's kind of did your patient, who, or not this, the lady who was not your patient of the 3, did she have a separate attorney?
No, same attorney.
Okay.
Same everything. Everything's exactly the same. The only difference is my testimony versus testimony.
That makes it, yeah, that makes it real interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, very good. So that'll conclude the highlight today. We want to thank Dr. Mark for taking time out. And again, I'm Dr. Paul with Chiropractic Personal Injury Marketing, and this was the highlight of the month. And appreciate you taking time out, Dr. Holland.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Paul.
Take care.
You too. Bye-bye now.